here's what I don't understand. Global temperatures have dramatically fluctuated within the period that humans left records. I mean, not that long ago. I mean, there are cities underwater because sea levels have risen within recorded history. The signs of the glaciers are all around us. So that was all before the internal combustion engine. How do they explain that?
This is the problem. They admitted. A lot of them admitted. They willingly admitted. You can read all.
Well, you can't deny it. I mean, we had glaciers and then they melted because of global warming.
They are forced to confess. I mean, these are the confession time. It's the sun actually that does a lot of this. The glacier, like there's a period called Little Ice Age. From about 1300 to 1900, where very cold. And then there's a medieval warm period from 880 to about 1200. It was warm. I mean, you can grow wine in England, right? And now you cannot grow wine, right? Things like that. I mean, Greenland was green back then, but now it's full of glaciers. Ice is coming in. So what are you talking about exactly? And it was the sun, actually. The sun fit quite well. As far as we know, in terms of deducing the information of how does the sun, how bright was it, how dim was it? Basically, just like that. Just the amount of light coming out from the sun. Very tiny percentage, by the way. Very small. It's on the order of less than 1%, but it's more than enough because there's another effect that is very, very important. It's basically because the sun, the Earth is forced to go around the sun, and then the orbit change ever so slightly because of perturbation from all the other planets. Jupiter, Saturn, and even Venus and Mars, they're actually controlling what we do. And the moon, of course, is very important. But that other factors, the orbits, plus the changes of the sun by itself, between how bright, how dim it is, these two factors can explain just about everything that we know. All the data that I have, actually. So I've been this is why I was so fascinated in studying this issue. I spent my whole life actually studying this. Nothing but doing just this. And the more I understand, the more I think that, wow, it's just a gap to be filled in. We have too much information and then these people come along, say that CO2 is causing everything. I check. Oh, maybe they're right. I check. As a scientist, I have to check them. But then it's not even close. I mean, these people are talking about things that is, there's a famous phrase by a very famous Wisconsin meteorologist. His name is Professor Reed Bryson. He's one of the father of climatology, really. He just say that you go out and then you might as well, if you think CO2 is so, you might as well spit into the air and see what happened to the airflow. He was just basically saying that CO2 is nothing, cannot cause the climate to change or anything. It doesn't change anything, actually. It's the sun. Why you think the most important things that you should talk about, they never talk about that. They always want to average the data. The most important thing they should talk about, you know what? It's the season. No two winters are the same, no two summers are the same. And they never explain that. It's actually the orbits with the sun changing it ever so slightly. And I'm not talking. I have published papers and papers like that on all this to show and document why and how. That's what the fun part of doing science. It's not only chit-chatting, hand-waving like crazy. You have to be, even though I may look like one now, but I am always very calm when you write down. Every time I have to write a paper, I always tell my wife, please, don't disturb me for a few days. I'll be back. Things like that. Of course, working at home, but I'll be back.
So is there any way to predict what climate change will be based on
Actually, you can
sun?
Because of the orbit. The only thing we don't know is how to predict the sun changes by itself because the magnetism, just the magnetic field on the sun is too complicated. The sun is the magnetized ball, right? It's a gas, hot gas. It's about, the magnetic field is so strong, it's 10,000 times stronger than the Earth. The Earth is also a magnet, a bar magnet, basically.
Yes.
It's 1 Gauss, we have 10,000 Gauss at least on the sun. So it's a very different property. And it works very differently because it heated by basically a thermonuclear reaction inside the sun. So it created all kinds of hot gas behavior that is very difficult to try to master or even to model using mathematical equation. Actually, it's much easier to study the Earth than to do the sun. So that's part of the problem in scientific tasks, the physics task. They're very difficult. But then we learn a lot. We learn a lot through just watching the sun. Galileo Galilei, right? He pointed his telescope. He was smart enough. First, he pointed to Jupiter, the moon, right? Jupiter, then he saw the moon, right? He saw 4 moons around it. And then he's smart that he go the next day to watch it again. He watched and then he started to move. By the way, it's a famous story of Galileo Galilei. We'll talk about it someday. when he wrote that down, initially it was in Italian. When he realized he discovered something so unique, he changed the language to Latin. And the next day, yeah, I got it, man, the good one. So he started writing in Latin, precise language, okay? But anyway, for the sun, it's really so complicated that actually I've been studying this actually as long as you know me. I mean, I studied this for so long. We know a lot. I even wrote a popular book actually to try to explain why that during a period of the sunspot, so Galileo Galilei started in 1609, 1610 or so. So we have about now 413 years of data. But there's a period that deep inside the Little Ice Age, 1645 to 1715, is called the Maunder Minimum. Because during that period, the sunspot almost all disappear, especially in the northern hemisphere. It disappeared completely. Nobody knows why. And that's why the French astronomer, famous people like Cassini, the one that the Cassini spacecraft, he was observing at that time. He said, man, this Galileo guy must be on either drinking too much or lying or things like that. He said there's a lot of sunspots, but we observe at this time, we didn't see nothing. What's wrong? But it's an actual phenomenon, right? My good friend, which is the #1 world sunspot historian, he just wrote email to me, Douglas Hoyt. He actually was the master of this, collecting all the sunspot data, going back to all the major libraries, from Galileo first point all the way to present point. Basically found that this phenomenon is true because during that period, the sunspot was not there, not because nobody was watching. There was at least observed 80% of the time during the 70 years. You see, it's so unique, that period. But now we're beginning to try to learn what happened there. So during that period, we really think that the sun was so much dimmer, was substantially dimmer. This is why you have this Little Ice Age phenomenon. All the Thames River were froze. We have the Thames River in England, well known, and then all the ice skating thing, in Holland, all the different culture. And then these are all real, actual phenomena. And then this day, they're trying to say that maybe Little Ice Age is not Little Ice Age. They even try to change that in scientific field, actually. So this was very, very puzzling for me.
Why would they try and change that?
Oh, I don't know, because they want to say the CO2 is controlling everything. They kind of want to have CO2 as the prime driver of everything. This is part of the problem that I find.
Well, that's not science, that's lying.
It's bad. It's bad in science. This is why in science now, I rather say this thing outright. I rather have question that cannot be answered than answer that cannot be questioned. Because these people are just offering you the answer and then you should just shut up, like you say. Don't ask any question. Don't criticize. Don't even bother to think. Just accept what we say. I mean, you may have known that this, actually, if you want to get there, I can talk about this because this is rather famous because the other person is still around. He's the one who's shouting up and down these last 2 days to say that, we must stop fossil fuel. GOP is so evil. We must stop all of them because GOP are the evil political bodies in America that causes all this fossil fuel we are using fossil fuel and all that. His name is Professor Michael Mann. He's at University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
He created a paper, we call it a hockey stick.
Yes.
The stick paper.
The hockey stick.
He basically say that the temperature history, first of all, the true temperature history looked like this. That it was very warm from 800 AD, let's say warm, and then it cools down, about 1300 started to go down, cool. And then since about 1900th century, it started to warm back up. Way, way before CO2 is important, okay? That's another puzzle that they never want to explain. That look like this. That's the real story. Michael Mann came along, said that, he used mathematical algorithm, okay? You can use fancy words, but believe me, it's just mathematical algorithm, that he produced a stick for 1880 to about 1980 is all flat because it changed. It changed very tiny amount. So small that actually it doesn't mean anything. 0.1 or 0.2 degrees Celsius, so small. It doesn't mean, the one that I talk about, the change is 1 degree at least, so 5-6 times bigger than what he say. And then he just say this like this, and then it warm up because of the blade, which is the warming because of rising carbon dioxide. But he forgot to explain to you, this warming of the temperature started way before even the human part of the atmospheric carbon dioxide could be anything meaningful. This is part of the problem. It's all been crazy from day one. When this thing was published in 1999, I was the first few guy who raised a hand at the back of the class and say, "Excuse me, Professor Mann, he used to be my friend, by the way. Now he will never answer me. He used to exchange email with me because, we more or less share the same passion, want to understand things. Now he just say that his story is the only one that is correct. But it's not backed out by any data that we know. That's the problem. It's all mathematical products. This is how scary the whole world can be. And United Nations, the IPCC group that I mentioned, promoted his work, turning him into a major hero because he has solved one of these old puzzle problem that climatologists over millennia has been trying to solve since the day of the Greeks to try to understand how climate change. And this guy come along say that it look like this, only CO2 does it. And that's the problem.
So, I mean,
it just ain't so.
Some of this is very complex, but in the way you're describing it, if he's saying the warming period began before there was a meaningful addition of CO2 into the atmosphere caused by humans, yes, even I can understand that.
Yes,
right?
That's the truth.
So I would assume that lots of scientists who do this for a living might be asking the same question. Why don't they speak up?